number 2. This is Katrina Madewell, joined by Mr. Leo Kane. Adam Talley's out.
He's always out. I'm glad he can. I'm glad he makes it more than just his 2-minute tip of the week sometimes.
Yeah, we're lucky to see him an hour these days, really.
Yeah, no. He came in. He had a very good 2-minute tip of the week. He gave us some good insight into the appraisals. Got into a good scuffle like we normally do between inspection and insurance.
At least we didn't pick on Ray. Like, there's been times we had him in and he kind of got a little bit of a beating on the air.
Well, he was just talking about the nice things, like how to make your house smell pretty.
Yeah, well, it was a little more than that.
Scented candles, the wine, the cookies.
Yeah.
All the things you should leave out for your appraiser.
I think, Adam's starting to learn so much, like, in this process around appraisals and real estate. I think he's, like, scared to buy.
I think I've gotten him a little jaded against actually having an insurance policy, too.
All right, let's hop on over to our guests. And so we have Miss Lindsay Ruiz-Bash. She's one of our attorneys. She's been on, so no stranger to the show. Welcome back.
Good. Thanks for having me this morning.
We're glad you're here. And we're going to talk about some of the best options for real estate and a divorce, because that can be some of the toughest part, right, of the divorce is when you guys have a house to sell.
Yes, and that's one of the most common assets that almost every couple has to divide up. So
it's the first thing the attorneys look for, though, isn't it? Really? Because you guys have to know you're going to get paid. Nobody can work for free, right? Mm-hmm. That's the truth. So let's talk about real estate. Like, how is it split in a divorce? And, if nobody agrees, which way does that swing? Does the pick one way over another, or does the judge? Or
so generally, it's divided the way other marital assets are divided, through equitable distribution. So the court wants to see each party get their share of the equity in the home. However, many times what you'll find is only one spouse's name is on the deed, and so the court, if that's the case, the court can't force a sale unless that particular spouse wants the sale. So
even if it's a homestead property?
Correct. Yeah, they can't force it. They can force a payment to be made, which ultimately may result in the sale, but they can't force a partition of the home. They can't force the sale.
That's an interesting little fact. Didn't know that.
I knew that.
I thought if it was homestead, though, they could make them.
No?
Okay.
No. And so that comes up a lot. A lot of people don't know that, and then they get upset that they can't force the sale. And then,
so what do they do at that point? Like, are they looking at other assets, trying to, like, how does that work?
Yeah, a lot of times somebody will pay out the equity through a 401k. They'll take a loan from their 401k or something of that nature. Like I said, though, many times it ends up resulting in the sale of the home, regardless of whether the court can force it or not. So, yeah.
Well, let me just, let's say, generically speaking, one spouse, let's say the spouse whose name is on the deed is the primary breadwinner, and not only is their name only on the deed, but they've got, say, a huge 401k, they've got some retirements, they've got quite a few assets, and then these joint bank accounts. How would the courts look at that?
The court is going to look, as far as who's going to remain in the, well, you're saying if only one spouse is on the property, they'll make sure that there's a method to pay the other spouse their equity from the home, and they can order that to be paid from a 401k, whether that's marital or not. So
they're entitled to the equity, but they can't force a sale.
Correct, yeah.
Got it. Yeah, and like you say, that could ultimately force a sale if they're not liquid enough, or if they can't basically get it. So another one too that I know, I'm sure you probably get pretty often is, can my ex sell the house without my permission?
If your name is on the deed, no. And if you are still married, Florida does require signatures from your spouse to sell or purchase a home. So they're going to need to be notified.
A primary home.
Yes, a primary home.
Primary home. So actually, I have this great, we were talking about, it's more of like a pamphlet because it's such a small book, but it's literally about 92 pages, and it's the best-selling options in a divorce. And if you'd like to get a copy of this, just call or text 813-377-2775, and we'd be glad to get you a copy. We've got at least 5 copies of those we can give away. And just call or text divorce to 813-377-2775. Again, 813-377-2775. So I'm sure this comes up very often, right? So let's say both people's name is on the house, and then what happens if only one person wants to sell and the other one's like, no, I want to stay here?
So the spouse who wants to sell will either will need to include in their petition for dissolution of marriage a count for partition, and then they can move forward.
Wait, you have to break down what that means in English. That was total attorney attorney
was
language
just
there.
I started some Latin.
So what it means is you are requesting that the court force a sale.
Okay.
It's what you call a forced sale action.
Yeah.
So the court can then force an auction if you won't, or they can force the parties to choose a realtor and list it. It gives them the
you don't
authority
want
to
to do an auction. You'll get the lowest possible
I know,
price via
I
an
know.
auction. So what happens when they both want to live there? Do you see that often where nobody wants to move and they want the other party to move?
I do, and what ends up happening is the parties can be forced to stay there all the way until the final judgment if there's no danger, if there's no domestic violence. And I have seen that. I've seen people live in a home together for the whole year and a half.
How do they do that? Does one sleep in the guest room, or?
It's not comfortable. there's fighting and bickering.
How often are they calling you in the middle of that process if they're both all living together?
Weekly, I would say.
If you're lucky, just weekly, right?
Exactly.
So it's, I can't even imagine what that would be like, but and it takes a year and a half. That's what you're saying?
It can take 4 to 6 months on the shorter end if it's contested, or it can take. I've had contested actions last 3 years. It just depends on how hard everyone's fighting.
I can't imagine anybody wins, right, in that scenario.
There's not really a clear winner in a divorce. It's everyone only gets a portion of what they're looking for usually.
Right. So what are some of the common things that you see, like especially like mistakes? Like what do you see couples, going through when it involves a divorce and there's real estate involved?
One of the biggest mistakes I see is a marital settlement agreement or a final judgment of dissolution of marriage not being specific enough on what happens to the real estate. A lot of times, both parties are on the mortgage, both parties are on the deed. One spouse says, hey, you can go ahead and stay there. When you sell, I'll take half the equity. But there's no time limit. There's no discussion about how the mortgage is going to be refinanced. Eventually, the spouse who's no longer living there will want to purchase a home and may not be able to because their name is tied to the mortgage on their previous marital home.
How often would you say that's the case, that there's no specificity in that order? That's kind of a big deal. You would think judges would be really clear about that.
It happens a lot, and I especially see it with parties who don't have attorneys. They just don't know to specify those types of things. And judges, if you file a marital settlement agreement in the court's not going to then go to try to tell you this isn't specific enough. They'll just enter an order adopting it. So I see it very frequently. So you're saying
one person has an attorney or there's no attorneys and they're just doing it?
Either or. I've seen that mistake made when attorneys are on the case too.
Well, yeah, they're not all created equal, are they?
No.
We've seen that for sure. So, and then you probably see this pretty often, but I know one of the questions we get is, can one spouse buy the other one out?
Yes, you can, but the spouse who's being bought out needs to agree to it. Obviously, if they don't, or if they're being vindictive, they can force the sale if their name is on the deed as well.
I would like to go back to the specificity for a minute, just with what type of things should be in there. I would imagine a lot of times you'll see like, okay, you have to sell once the kids are graduated from high school or things like that. But what else are you seeing?
I would say give a time frame for refinance, so 6 months to a year with actual efforts being made. And if you're unable to refinance at that point, you have to talk about who can have access to the home for the listing. A lot of times people forget that if one person doesn't want to list the home, they may make the home look poor in order to avoid the sale. So you want to make sure that there's language about upkeep of the home and the way it looks and the interior, the cleanliness.
Oh, we've seen that. I've seen that
Yeah.
where we've been selected, by both parties to sell the property, but the one living in there, a lot of times it's the wife. They don't want to leave. They don't want to move. Sometimes it's a guy too, but we've seen that, and literally they will make it almost impossible to meet with. And if it's impossible for me to meet with them, it's going to be just as impossible, to get showings through there.
Exactly.
And so usually we'll do like an open house style, and in this market it can work. It works well, but in a traditional market where it's a 6 to 12 month absorption rate, it's a little longer time on the market, it's not as easy.
Exactly. It gets difficult.
So, all right, we'll chat a little bit more about some of that stuff and then some. If you've got some questions about divorce and how it relates to real estate or otherwise, it's a good time to text those to 813-377-2775. Again, 813 888-377-2775. Stick around, and we will be back right after this break. This is Tampa Home Talk.
Oh, good morning. Welcome back. Leo Kane here with Beryl Engineering and Inspection. Realizing we just zoomed through. How did we zoom through an entire list of 9 questions?
We have an attorney in the studio. She's probably a high D like me, and boom, we're done.
But they get
show's over. That's it.
They get paid by the word.
Well, not today, but gotta get stuff done, man. We got stuff to do. So we have another guest that's coming up, Miss Wilma Norton, and she actually had a question during the break, and I'm like, wait, you're gonna have to hold that for when we come back. So what you got? You had a story or a question?
Well, I was saying I did have a friend who was in that situation that you described of living in the house for a year with the divorcing spouse and, getting into arguments over who ate the yogurt and just like a bad roommate situation.
That's exactly what it's like.
Yeah, it's worse than a bad roommate because you know them better than anyone.
Exactly. But I had asked a question about, are there things people who are happily married and not even anticipating
should probably
a divorce
know before they ever
should know when they buy property?
Well, one of the biggest things would be IRS debt, and making sure that if there's a potential for a tax lien, that person's name is not going on the property.
Which is a lot of self-employed people. It's not everybody, but many self-employed people probably have a bigger propensity for a tax lien, wouldn't you say? No, maybe?
I would agree with that.
No comments.
Okay, Leo.
No comments.
He does not like talking to divorce attorneys. I'm just saying, like when they're in the studio, he barely says anything.
I have no problem talking to a divorce attorney. In fact, divorce attorneys are friendly to me because they usually involve a home sale, and then they usually involve 2 home purchases.
Yes, you're right.
And there was someone who published a book about that very concept.
Best-selling options in a divorce. We're going to have to give Lindsay some of these to take with her to give to our clients.
Yeah.
It could work.
Yeah, just set them up in her little lobby while people are waiting to get divorce counseling. They can read the book of best-selling options.
So we talked a little bit in the last segment about how basically, there's no attorney or one attorney or a bad attorney, and there's not enough specificity in that. What sort of things should people know, and what should they get covered in the paperwork while they're preparing for the divorce before it actually gets finalized with the judge? Because I'm sure you got a lot of experience around this.
Some examples would include, the terms for refinance, what happens if one party defaults on the loan or falls more than 30 or 60 days behind on the payments. You don't want it to get to that 90-day mark.
Well, technically on your mortgage, you're in default after 30 days.
Exactly. Exactly. Those are important for credit issues and refinancing, or for both parties purchasing a home later on.
Yeah, because I'll tell you, if you're on it with husband and wife and you're out and you think this one's paying it and they're not, and this is now reported to your credit even 30 days, let alone 60 or 90, you are not getting a loan for a while.
Exactly. So the times for refinancing, that time when somebody has to execute a quitclaim deed to the other party, making sure that they're forced to comply with closing, that they have to show up to the closing.
What do they do? When someone doesn't show up, how do they force them?
Well,
I know the judge can force them, but what does that look like?
You can't actually physically force somebody to get there. So if they refuse to show up and multiple closings are lost, they could lose their equity, or they could be responsible for the portion, the reduction in sale price. Or a court can even appoint an attorney ad litem, which is somebody who acts on the spouse that's refusing to sign's behalf, so they can sign the paperwork in their behalf.
Wow.
I've actually had to do that before.
How often does that occur, as opposed to the judge just getting irritated saying, you're in contempt of court, you don't want to show up, you're going to lose your equity?
I think in 10 years I've had to do that one time.
That's what I see happening more with the judges. If you're not willing to show up, I'm going to tell you what you're going to get, or you won't get anything.
Exactly.
Am I wrong?
Sounds like small claims court.
I don't know about that when it comes to real estate. So, and you had, I was trying to think what else we were just talking about a second ago, because we had a few other things.
There was the choosing a realtor and a broker, having a method for choosing them. A lot of times parties can't agree, or just because he suggests somebody, she refuses to accept that person. But having a method of maybe each providing 3 names, if you can't agree within 2 weeks, the judge picks one of
Yeah.
them.
Well, both husband and wife could provide 3 names, and then the judge could pick one of those.
You can do that as well. Mm-hmm.
We can just put all the names in a hat and just pull one.
Yeah, those are interesting too, because I've been actually commissioned to sell some of those, where the judge has said, "You're the one that's going to sell it," and then maybe neither party picked me, and so it's like can get a little bit, you know, not fun, especially if they're both living there. Oh, yeah,
That's a nightmare.
It's like, well, that's interesting too, because then at that point we're the ones that set the price. And then it's really in their best interest to figure it out together and have the parties sign the listing agreement versus have the judge order a commission sale where somebody like me sets the price, signs the paperwork, and basically lists
Isn't
the
it
property.
always in the seller's best interest to have the real estate agent such as yourself set the price?
Well, no, but here's the thing. Here's the difference between a husband and a wife selling voluntarily versus the court taking the action to choose a commissioner to sell the property. The difference is if the husband and wife are choosing to sell the property, you know, we're going to work through all those details together. Everything from price to showings, you know, there's going to be a lot of communication. The goal is going to be to make it as easy as it can be for them. It's already a bad situation, so that they can maximize their equity and walk away with the most amount of money. If it's commissioned to sell, then you have to think about what that process is like from the real estate perspective. We can't, and the attorney doesn't want to do this either. They can't keep go back to the judge if stuff falls through or doesn't, you know what I mean? That just doesn't work. So we have to get a buyer the first time around that we know is going to make it to the finish line. And so essentially we do that by adjusting the price and usually looking for a cash buyer, which is not in the seller's best interest, if you ask me. But if it's, you know, if it gets pushed to that point to where nobody can agree on anything, it's usually, you lose. Everybody loses.
Exactly.
You know, we want you guys to sell for the most. I mean, and if you get somebody like me, I mean, literally my negotiating skills alone are worth every single penny I'm paid. I tell people this all the time, but until they actually see it in action, they don't realize it. Like, you know, I had this listing that just came up and is already pending, and it was a pretty good offer out of the gate. And then we got another one that was a little bit higher, but not as strong. And so I told the seller, they're like, well, I encouraged them to wait through the weekend. They didn't want to do it. They're like, we want to do it. I said, fine, then counter. That's going to buy you some time. But here's what I would do. They were asking for closing costs. I said I would counter with no closing costs in there. And so that part alone, just listening to my advice, getting through it, already netted more than what they're going to pay me. So between that and repairs and stuff like that, it's like, just like you mentioned with attorneys earlier, they're not all the same. And a good one is worth their weight. They're going to save you time. They're going to save you money. They're going to save you headaches. They're going to save you having to go back to court in front of the judge, right? Mm-hmm. You mentioned some of that paperwork's loosey-goosey, and now you got to go back to force a sale or put a deadline or pick an agent.
Well, you know, the court can't add terms into a marital settlement agreement. They can clarify their final judgment, but if you've entered into a settlement agreement that doesn't list these terms, the court can't modify that. Their hands are tied. So you just are basically stuck in this situation.
So do they have to take a new action to force a sale or whatever?
They may have to take a new action if they're entitled to in civil court. I've seen a situation before where the deed was transferred, so the spouse who was stuck on the mortgage didn't have standing to bring another action and was essentially in this game for about 12 years trying to get her name off the mortgage because the initial paperwork didn't remove it.
Yeah, I tell you, it's something you got to pay attention to, and if it's a seasoned, experienced attorney like Lindsay, she's gonna go through this, right? She's gonna see that in the past, and so that's the beauty that you get from someone that's got, for example, like 3 decades. Myself, I see stuff before it happens, right? I've seen the flip side to that. That's awful. So if I'm representing my client going into it, we're gonna make sure that, you know, all that is smooth as possible so that they don't run into any of these things.
Exactly. You also want to make sure in the settlement agreements that they're properly getting credit for any mortgage payments or repairs they're doing on the home during the pendency of the divorce.
So say more about that.
So if you're living in the home and you're making all the mortgage payments and the other spouse is not, you should be getting credit at least for your share of those payments. Not necessarily 100%, depending upon the situation.
So would they take at it? So for example, would they look at the amortization schedule and take take it from that time right there, when maybe they were both living there, to now maybe one person's living there, and they look at the AM schedule and they say, okay, roughly your balance is this.
Yes.
So this is the equity we're going to share.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
They do it like that.
Well, I mean, that makes sense, you
Yeah.
know, versus, because
And
these can drag on, like you say.
And some people like to make repairs that aren't really increasing the value of the home. So then you have to kind of figure out how you're going to adjust the value of the home or give them credit for that. And it may not be full credit.
We've seen some interesting things. I mean, I've in 30 years, I've seen everything. I had one that was, the lady was in the property, and there was so much deferred maintenance when I went in there. Like, there were so many things that were not done, and it was just a sad situation because she was like at home caring for the kids. Some of them had special needs, and the divorcee husband, or she couldn't even get divorced, but he was like a professional hacker, and it was such a thing. Like, I was like, I don't think I really even want to be involved in this one. Like, I don't think it's a good idea. So, all right, when we come back, we are going to join Miss Wilma Norton. She's the Vice President of Community Connection at the Community Foundation of Tampa Bay. We're going to talk a little bit about who they are, what they do, and a little bit more. And I'm sure Lindsay will have a few questions for you as we dive into your organization. Yes. This is Tampa Home Talk. Our off-air number is 813-377-2775.
Good morning, welcome back. This is Leo Kane with Beryl Engineering and Inspection.
Yes, it is, and this is Katrina Madewell. I'm your host.
It is, and we have a lovely guest, the Vice President of Community Connections at the Community Foundation of Tampa Bay, Wilma Norton.
Yes, we do.
Thanks
so talk
for
about
having
your foundation. What do you guys do? Because I'm not familiar with you.
Yeah, what is the Community Foundation of Tampa Bay?
Well, it's different than what you think of as a normal nonprofit. We connect donors, resources, and partner with them to get the charitable donations out into the community, and we help their charitable investments grow. And then we also work with folks in the community in business and nonprofits and that sort of thing on initiatives that build the community.
Break that down a little bit. Like, let's be a little more clear about what you're talking about. Give me an example.
So if I am a person who has money that, or property or stock or anything like that, that I'd like to give for a charitable purpose, we take that, we invest it, and then help them direct the proceeds of that out into the community to help the nonprofits that are feeding or doing any other sort of work in the community. We grow philanthropy.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. How do you grow it? But it sounds like maybe you sell it and reinvest it.
We invest, right now we have about $300 million in philanthropic assets invested, and that goes into that can go in a lot of different ways. Some of those are permanent funds that generate money every year for specific purposes. A lot of them are funds that are called donor advised funds, kind of giving funds. Charitable checking accounts is sort of how we like to describe it. I can give a house or make a donation of money or stock. It then becomes the property of the community foundation, but as the donor, I still can say at any time, hey, I want to designate $5,000 of this to this purpose, or $10,000 to this purpose, or $250 to this purpose. And as part of what we do, besides investing that money, is that we work with nonprofits in the community so that we know what the needs are. And a lot of people who work with us, they know where they want their charitable investments to go. But a lot of people come to us and say, we know we have a passion for helping children, but we don't know the best way to do it. And so we're the matchmakers, philanthropic matchmakers, to help them find projects or organizations that they'd like to support with their money or their time or those kinds of things.
What a cool concept. Like, I'd never even realized that existed.
Well, community foundations are more than 100 years old. They started in Cleveland. Our community foundation is one of the newer ones in the country. We are only 32 years old.
Wow.
But it really, the name says what it is. It is a charitable foundation that is all about building and strengthening the community that we live in.
So who started your foundation?
A group of charitably minded, civically minded people in Tampa got together about 35 years ago and said, every great city in the country has a community foundation, and we don't have one.
Got it.
And so a man named George Baxter, who was our founding president, went to Cleveland, talked to them about how do you do this, because they're the oldest, and they said, it's easy. Go back, talk to the 10 biggest banks in your area, ask each of them to give you $100,000, and you'll be good to go. You'll have your founding.
And that's easy?
Well, I was going to say, George did that dutifully, and
he
came back
9.
with 0. So our foundation...
I was going to say $100,000 30-some years ago
I was going to say 9 denials and 10 denials there, and you got 10.
So our foundation was founded with a $100 donation from a retired teacher, and has grown from there.
Wow. That's incredible.
And so,
Okay, so where did they put
doubles every
that?
7 years using the principles of interest.
right.
But where did they put that $100? That's what I want to know. Does anybody know?
Well, it was put into the bank account, into our investment account. So yeah, it is now compounded. When I was getting my MBA, that was always the thing I couldn't make the calculator work to compound interest, so I can't tell you how much $100 would be now.
Right now, it's not a whole lot of compound interest where the rates are.
Well,
We talked about that this morning.
Exactly. But that it grew from there, and we were talking earlier. We hold permanent funds that support. We hold the Morsani Endowment for the Strass Center, for example. So that is part of what we do, is that we hold those permanent funds that people establish. But a big part of our work, and a growing part of our work, is with donors who want these charitable checking accounts, because one of the trends in philanthropy is people don't care as much these days. I mean, people still do, and it's still important to invest forever, and we certainly encourage that. But a lot of folks also want to have that joy of giving while they're living.
Yeah.
And we work with a lot of people who've established family foundations, so that you save for retirement, you save for college, you also save for your charitable investment, so that you can teach your children to be philanthropic. But also, we have a number of people who've been doing that, so that when they reach retirement age, that can be their project, is how to direct those funds they've been setting aside and that have been growing for 20 years. Now they can spend their retirement helping build our community by giving out these
That's
philanthropic
really exciting.
funds. You can tell by my voice, this is the best job I've ever had, because you feel like everything that we do, even though it's transactional in terms of we're investing money and helping it grow and that sort of thing, there are people at the other end of that.
Well, you get the big picture, how the whole vision of the organization actually matters.
And that it is making this a better place to live and to work, and to live, work, and play. That's kind of a trite saying.
Are your funds for the foundation, are they all based on community donations, or do you get any grants or anything like that?
Have the bank started donating?
Yeah, right.
We are one of our good partners in a project we do involving education in our area is Bank of America. So yes, the banks and the Bank of Tampa is involved. They are philanthropic. But one of the things about this area is that we don't have a lot of big national corporations based here. So our donations do really come, even the ones that we have a number of corporate donors, they're more homegrown. We're dealing with the people who also live here, and that does make it exciting.
And the people on the other end, who are a lot of the companies that you work with that are on the receiving end of it?
We work with the whole range of nonprofits, everything from arts organizations to the people who do care and feeding, to mental health, animal welfare.
So when I'm ready to start my nonprofit, which I've talked about forever, that's like a homeowner down payment assistance match, you're the one that can help me.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. And we do work with nonprofits in helping them get their message out, to the donors, like I said, we're sort of a matchmaker. One of the things that I'm really proud of that we did during the COVID-19 crisis is we, of course, started a relief fund, as everyone did, but we recognized that the thing that we could do that could have the most impact for the nonprofits was to give them a way to get their message out to the community about what their needs were. So we established a nonprofit needs list on our website, and that is still going, and I don't see it ending anytime soon. And so they can, in 7 simple questions, it's not a grant application, put up there, here's what I need, and why, and how much it costs.
What are some of the biggest things you're seeing on there?
Well, it's interesting. Initially it was all food and shelter. But as time has gone on, it really has shifted a little bit more away from that. Those are still important, but toward education for things like hotspots for students in Waimama who can't go to school because they don't have internet connection.
Mm-hmm.
We were hearing stories about people driving around trying to pick up signals from McDonald's. So those kinds of things, or in the arts organizations, a lot of them.
I feel like the school should have done a little bit of a better job. They did do like a questionnaire, but I feel like they should have done a little bit of a better job. Even talking to the kids, really, to find out which ones had internet at home. Well, if it's ever been interrupted.
And that we already knew there was a digital divide. The pandemic has made that even more evident. We were just talking yesterday, once we got those hotspots into the hands of some of those like migrant children, it opened the eyes of their parents to things like the portal, the school portal. A lot of parents who didn't have internet access were missing whole parts of their children's education because, those of us who've had kids in the public schools know the portal is life. So there's all
been
of those
rough
kinds
too.
of things.
It's been a rough adjustment for parents even with internet connection. I can't imagine without it. Like it would be even worse.
Well, and as part of that whole nonprofit needs thing, in addition to getting it out to the community, we went to the people who have those funds with us, those charitable checking accounts, and said, now is the time. You've been putting this money aside for an emergency, in essence. Now is the time to dig into those accounts. And we offered a match if one of our donors from their fund gave to one of the things on that nonprofit needs list, we would match it 1 to 3. And so between our donors and some partners who came in with us and our matching funds, we've distributed almost $4.5 million to cover needs on that list. But the last time I looked, that needs list was still $17 million.
Wow. So you guys are not only helping with the matchmaking part of it, but you also help people set up, like you said, that charitable checking account. And then from there, you're also helping people invest it so they can maximize that money that's going in.
Right. We do all aspects of both of growing and doing philanthropy. And as part of that, one of our goals too is to look at community initiatives that we can bring people together to work on. And I mentioned we're a backbone organization for something called LEAP Tampa Bay, which is a coalition of government, business, and all sorts of folks trying to get more people to get that college degree or credential. And that's a workforce effort. That's a prosperity effort that benefits us all, not just the people who get the degree.
That's the thing with philanthropy and charitable organizations, and this is my thought. It definitely has to be more of a hand up versus a hand out, because if we don't make that change as a community, it doesn't really change anything.
Right. We have to work on solutions along with keeping people fed and clothed and mentally well and physically well in the meantime.
Absolutely. Well, when we come back, I'm going to pass the ball to Leo, because he's so chatty this morning. I think he's got some things to ask you, and I know he loves to support the Turtles, so I'm sure he's going to have quite a few things to talk about. This is Tampa Home Talk, and Mr. Leo is excited to talk to you. We'll be back in just a minute.
813-377-2775. 813-377-2775.
And that. You can call or text. We'll be back.
And we're back. back. Was it just me, or did that commercial just kind of like drag on with the same sentence over and over a little too much?
Well, they wanted to make sure you heard ZipRecruiter or whatever.
For free. All I heard was free.
Yeah.
Speaking of free, oh wait, I can't go with my question yet.
Not yet. Lindsay had one on the break.
Lindsay has a question on the break, and then I have some questions about free.
I was just asking if people actually leave money to the foundation in their wills, because sometimes I do have clients that don't have children or something, or family members to leave their assets to, and I've suggested leaving money to a charity. They don't really have an idea of which charity they would like to choose. So it sounds like you all would be a good option.
I was going to say, those are our people. That is one of the prime things that we do. And whether or not they have children, sometimes they do have other beneficiaries, but they want to be sure they've taken care of things they care about when they're gone. And so there are a number of options for that. They can either set up a fund that's designated. We always use the example, if they love dogs and cats, they can leave their estate to a fund that we will distribute the proceeds to animal organizations. They can specify or can leave it general. Or they can leave their money to just the general, use it for what is the greatest need in the community. And that's sort of the beauty of the community foundation, is needs change over time. So if you say, I really care about this thing, and then we solve that problem, and 20 years from now another thing is the greatest need, then we can shift the assets toward that. So, but yeah, we're happy to talk with anybody about legacy plans, and often it's in combination. They do a fund that they can use while they're giving, and then figure out how they want to continue giving after they're gone.
Well, you were talking about the charitable checking account. Is there a minimum amount that's required?
Our minimum to set up a fund is $10,000 right now, and that's a good point, is that I think a lot of times when philanthropy is a big word, and people think, oh, if you're a philanthropist, that means you're somebody who has multi-million-dollar, Jeff Bezos and his ex-wife each just gave out, billions of dollars. People think you have to be multimillionaires to be a philanthropist. Philanthropy just means giving and loving your fellow man. And so all of us are philanthropists.
If you tithe, you're a philanthropist.
Right, in some way or another. And so while $10,000 may seem like a large amount of money, if you take a step back and think about that, if you tithe to your church, if you are a big supporter of a number of issues in our community, things like the Red Cross or any of those kinds of things, a lot of people at the end of the day probably do give away $10,000 in a year. And I'm not a tax expert, but there are advantages sometimes to putting the money in a certain year and itemizing every other year. There's a lot of those kinds of things that professional advisors help their clients with.
So let's say I've taken $10,000 and I put it in this fund. What happens to the $10,000 at that point?
It's invested, and the proceeds can, as it grows, that still stays with that $10,000. So that's the beauty of these funds, is that you make the contribution, you make the donation when it's right for you, and then you have time to let it grow and figure out where exactly you want to make the contribution.
What if I'm going to donate something like, other than money, let's say a house or some stocks or other things that have high value? Are we able to do that, or you only
Absolutely.
Taking cash?
Absolutely. We, a lot, especially this time of year, especially in December.
All the Christmas gifts we don't want.
Especially in December, appreciated stock are a lot of our donations, because it's more beneficial to you when the stock market is as good as it is now. If you have stock that has grown a great deal, it is better financially to donate that stock, and then we sell the stock and put the proceeds into the fund, than to sell the stock and donate the proceeds. And the same, we take real property. People have donated houses, art collections, pretty much anything of high value. Sometimes you have to do appraisals, and some of that can get complicated, but there are lots of ways to fund your initial investment. It doesn't have to be write a check for $10,000 or
that could
or $50,000 or
probably
$100,000.
feel that pretty easy with our addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So how do you I know you said you sell the stock, but then how do you invest in it? Like what methods
We
do you
have
use?
we have a management company. We have investment managers who do all of that for us, and we have a volunteer group of business people who are prominent in the community, who've been very successful, who oversee and advise us on the investments and our investment committee. So it is all very community based. And
What are those returns like now? Because everything, well, not everything, but a lot of them are low. Some of them are good.
yeah. Well, and that is what we pay the investment company to do, is to manage those investments for the long term. And that's, especially when you're talking about endowment, you want that to grow over time. You want to hedge against the bad times. That sometimes means a little less in the good times. But I think over the 30 years, our investment return has averaged somewhere around 7.5% over the 30 years.
That's good. Can we invest and just keep the money ourselves? I mean,
No.
That's pretty good. 7.5% return sounds pretty good.
No. And
Over 30 years.
That is the thing. Once you make the contribution to the community foundation, the assets technically are ours, but there are always ways for you to suggest and honestly, as long as the way this all works is that as long as what you want to direct those charitable funds to is a nonprofit that is recognized by the IRS and in good standing with the IRS, then we follow your wishes.
501c3.
501c3, yes. I was trying not to use the all of the jargon.
Leo likes to save the turtles.
No, we donate a lot of money to organizations across the state of Florida to help with sea turtle research and sea turtle development of baby hatchlings. So
yeah, we do a lot of work with Tampa Bay Watch.
Yeah.
They have an endowment with us, and we've given grants and worked closely with them over the years, and other environmental groups too. That's it does run the gamut.
Nice. So if we want to donate and set up a fund, make sure you text the word fund to 813-377-2775. That's 813-377-2775. And if you'd like a book on how to get divorced,
No.
also text 813-377-2775. Text divorce.
No, that's Lindsay's book. This is the best-selling options in a divorce.
I'm offering Lindsay's book. This one's going in her office.
Got it. All right. Tampa Home Talk. We'd had fun with you guys. We missed you.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I haven't been here in over a month.
And it's been about a month. All right.
Pre-records. I'm not even in on the pre-records. I'm going to grumble my way through that.
We'll be back next week for another live show with some more fascinating guests and your market report Friday morning.
813-377-2775. You can call or text book, divorce.
Love where you live or I'll fix it. Bye.
Or
We're out of
fun.
time.
Love where you live or my mommy will fix it.